as Mr. Jones and I approach 45, which is the purpose for this podcast, we are approaching that age and that shift of now that we're done spending money. Fuck, man. Now what? Recap for those of you that didn't catch last episode. It was the Fiddler Wheated Bourbon from the ASW Distillery. It is 54% corn, 45% wheat, 4% barley.
It tastes a lot like a wheated.
Well, you grabbed this from your watering hole, right?
Yeah,
This
and
was a
it's
personal recommendation.
and that's the thing about wheated bourbons.
We can't think of any browns that we have found in the Atlanta area. We certainly don't think of Atlanta as bourbon central. That's Kentucky. So this is interesting that Atlanta has stepped up in a big way, and we now love this high wheat bourbon Fiddler from the ASW Distillery. Personally, I like it. So if you heard the last episode, you know that we love it. And we're moving into Fiddler Wheated for our next discussion, which is financial, based on Mr. Jones, who was our Sultan of Soccer and our Pharaoh of Finance. Now, as a prelude to what we're going to talk about, Danny is an idiot when it comes to locking down a revocable trust. So I wanted to talk to Mr. Jones about trusts, and I wanted to get a sense of his take on it from a financial perspective. I know what they are. I know why they're important. Taxes and intergenerational wealth and legacy. That's a hobby of mine. So we're going to talk about that as well. But why should someone get a trust? Go.
First off, every person should have a trust.
Everyone. In this country or around the world?
Well, I only can speak about this country. I'm not sure about other international laws. There's other stipulations if you talk about other countries.
So trust is a legal vehicle.
It's a legal vehicle, but I mean, other countries themselves have other laws in which once you push up daisies, you're required to do X. Germany is different. This is one that I know about, but I mean, I'm not sure about all the other countries.
Let's start with the trust. By definition, what is it in the United States? By definition,
in the U.S.,
by definition, what is the trust?
A trust is simply a directive in which you have entered into a legal document that will provide, once your passing happens, an order of how your assets will be distributed, as well as directives of how you want your demise to be, in the sense of your directive to your burial, scattered ashes, and so forth. It is a culmination of what do you want your legacy to look like, from your asset distribution to your remains to your what is left after you are unable to provide this to people. So it is at least a doctrine that will at least give the guidance that is needed. And it provides tremendous, in this directive, what does it really do? Well, let's look. It avoids probate, maintains privacy, controls over assets distribution, protects the creditors and lawsuits, estate tax benefits, provides for minors and special needs benefits. It basically fully encompasses planning so that you, when you die, have some sense of what happens next.
How is it different than a will?
Well, the will is only one thing. Will is basically who you give stuff to, but it doesn't tell you how do you want your body to be. How is the directives?
But you can include those details in a will, right?
I don't think so. I'm not a lawyer, guys. I'm just telling you, everybody should have a trust because this encompasses the whole thing. Because no one wants to die and all of a sudden give half of your assets to the government. Once you put it in front of a judge, they get to choose what happens. Do you really want to get your state and your Uncle Sam half your assets?
What do you know about probate?
Oh, I'm not a probate attorney. I couldn't tell you.
Probate, from my understanding, is if you do not have these legal things put in place that give specific direction about how you want things done, it falls under the jurisdiction of a judge.
Right.
And the judge then says, based on the evidence that I understand, which is who this person was and what they wanted, the judge then says, I hereby direct blah, blah, blah to happen, which is usually asset distribution. Children, we talked about this.
Yes, this is important.
And if there is not specific instructions on how you want things to be done, the judge, in this case, now has to make a decision based on what they know about you, which is very little, and that will affect what happens after you are gone.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much.
Probate is Latin for people who lay claim to what you have, argue over it, and the estate takes its cut.
So
Is that a fair adjudication of probate?
pretty much spot on. So this at least allows you to make the decision. You pick what you want to do. Because no one forces you to do this. The only thing you're forced to do in life, death and taxes. This is
Death
what
and
happens
taxes.
afterwards.
Yeah.
So this is why I say everyone. I don't know really where everyone really sits. Everyone that has $20 in their wallet.
Every listener, all of you Bobs that are in the United States.
Pretty much. I can't see a reason why you wouldn't do this. I mean, I can't see a reason. I really can't.
Pay
And
the
so
money,
if
get
you're
a
not,
trust.
and I think the point about why I bring this up with you is that you have substantial assets as well as children, as well as all these, which is usually a trigger for most people of why you need a trust. No one's thinking about it when you're in your 20s or even your 30s. But when you have kids, that's what triggers. So this is where you put your house. This is where you call out your 401ks, your pension, your overall investment account, as well as your checking, savings. Because at the end of the day, you're going to go through life, and it's the insurance policy that at least gives your voice in your passing. And in doing so, then on the other side is you can always amend them and change them. You can always change as someone. Things don't always go to plan. So you consistently need to revise them, update them. And probably in your life, you're looking at least 3 updates. Probably.
If it's revocable.
Yes.
What are the 3?
I think you have revocable, irrevocable, and there's another one. What's the other one?
I don't know. I didn't know there was more than 2.
I only know of 2. I think there's another. There's all different ways to structure this. So this
Right, but
really
you're talking
brings
about 3 stages in life.
3 stages in life. You have kids. You in the sense of you have kids, and then there's usually this is the entrance of the trust, and then as you get to about the kids are about 10 to 12 or somewhere in between, you will need to revise your trust. And I say this because this is what happens in life is that we usually gain assets in this period of time because this is when our durable goods spending is the highest. And so
You're talking about age demographic.
yes, in the sense of income,
I would
age.
love to dive into that.
Yeah, it's income, age. So this is why I say this is you have 1, the start. 2 is this middle ground of there is a life-changing thing. Sometimes life changes. It's where we see divorces. This is where we see job changes. This is where we see true worth being generated. And so you finish number 2, and this is why the third one is this is the twilight, this is the end, this is the retirement, this is the finish. So this is why I say like you at least have the start, you have the middle, and you have the finish. This is why you usually have about 3 somewhat amendments to your trust. This is what I bring up. Does that make sense?
I love it. No, I love it.
Because
So
this is life.
there's a guy that I'm a really, really big fan of. His name is Peter Zeihan.
Oh, yes.
Have I
He's
talked
quite
about
wild.
him?
Let's go on a hike.
Have I talked about him?
Yeah, let's go on a hike.
So Zeihan has a number of detractors online, which is fine, perfectly normal. A lot of people think that he is a CIA stooge, perfectly fine. He's an NGO. He's a mouthpiece for the blob, according to Mike Benz. Those guys, the guys that you see on Rogan, perfectly fine, legitimate criticism. However, part of what he talks about is demographics, which I think is immutable. Demographics is the study of people and where they are in their life.
True.
I'm a huge demographics nerd. I believe, as Peter does, as Peter Drucker does, as a number of really, really smart thinkers like Milton Friedman and other economists, that demographics is destiny. Demographics in a nutshell, and I want you to pause and call me out, Mr. Jones. In the United States, as an example, from the age of 13 to 24, you are in consumption mode. You are trying to figure out your identity. You have figured out how money works. You have an allowance. You have a job. You have some means of small income.
I would call it identifying. I wouldn't call it consumption.
What would you call it?
Identifying. You're identifying your path.
Fair.
You're not consuming much.
Well, I use consumption in terms of you buy because you have to, not because you understand what you're buying.
Fair enough. Because in that period of time, you're trying to discover your path.
Right. The reason I use
And
the
that's the
word
consumption.
consume is
It's
because
consuming
you
to
you
discover
consume food because you have to survive. You're not enjoying it, you're eating it. So that's the
so
reason
that
I
you
use the
can
word
live the
consume.
next point.
Right. Survival. That's the reason I use the word consume. So in from 13 to 24, this is Danny. This is Danny talking. From 13 to 24, you are consuming. You are consumed, pardon the pun, with how people think, where you are status wise, what you are achieving, who you are to what you want in terms of the opposite sex, the same sex, whatever. So there's
And,
there's
and,
elements
and,
of
and just to keep this simple, this is literally the period of time of probably the most change and growth in your life
yeah,
because you will be becoming an adult.
right.
But you aren't adulting yet.
No,
You are in the
we're
becoming
gonna get to
of
that.
child to adult.
We're going to get to that. You are in the middle of personal and mental development, and you are in the middle of personal development identity
Fair.
verification.
And
Who are
that's
you
correct.
as a person, right?
Yeah. And who will you develop to be a person? Who do
Right.
you want to be?
So, in my thesis, from the age of 13 to 24, you are figuring out who you are, which means you are spending. You're buying the drip, you're buying the Riz, you're buying the sneakers, you're buying the Starbucks, you're buying the clothes, you're
Plane
buying
flights.
the whatever.
The experiences in today's market.
Yeah.
You're buying the plane flights, you're buying the hotels, you're
You are
buying the
spending the money on outward facing things that will convince others who you are.
it's rounding you out to the future.
That is your basic idea of what economists call consumption.
So yeah, I guess that's the point. Whether that's knowledge in the sense of college, that's pretty much where your goal
Well,
is at the end. You're trying to round yourself out.
yeah.
You're creating
But
an
you're
identity.
spending money on Starbucks, you're spending money on movie tickets, you're
Yes,
spending
true.
money on restaurants, you're spending money on
Waste.
clothes.
Waste.
Well, economically,
Yeah,
waste.
terrible.
But to the 20 something, critical infrastructure.
Necessity.
Do I have Riz? Do I have the right shoes? Do I have the right clothes? Do I have
Do
the
I
right
fit in? Do I know the
Did
conversation?
I go on the right vacation?
Did I have the right experiences? Was this Burning Man the one I needed to go to or the next one?
Yeah.
Shout out to
After
the burners.
24, from 24 to 45, 50.
That's a fucking gap. Yeah.
Well, they're all gaps.
That's huge.
But what I would suggest
lot
is
of life
somewhere
change
between
there.
24, so from 24 to, let's do 24 to 45
That's fair.
for shits and giggles.
Because I think that's a good point. Because I think after you hit the 45 is where your real income starts. And that changes everything.
Well, so this is what I want you to talk about because I know you have strong opinions
Yeah.
on this. From 24 to 40 to 45, so somewhere in that 20-year gap. From 24, you're no longer a teenager. You're now an adult. You have to start adulting.
You're viewed as an
and the
adult.
fucking pain in the ass of adulting is a mortgage, bills.
Asset accumulation.
I want to talk about that because my understanding of adulting is financial requirements. You have to do this.
I think it's just the words
I
of
have to pay rent.
Shh.
I
Yes. You have to do these things whether you want to or not. That's it. Whether you have to take care of a parent.
From 13 to 24 is discretionary.
Correct. You have no responsibilities.
Right.
Because everyone could just pass it off as
Once
he's too
you're
young.
24, you now
need
take
to-
on non-variable fixed expenses. I have to pay my rent.
Yes.
I have to. So that's my theory. So part of my thesis is from 24 to 40 or 45. Fine. I'll put a flexible date on it. But you now have responsibilities that you have to deal with. I have to pay rent. I have to pay power. I have to pay water. I have to pay trash. You run into utilities expenses. Food. Clothing is still kind of fun.
I think you fill the gap is what you need.
Right. Cable, internet, you kind of choose. But the basic thing of being on your own without your parents is you need water, you need trash,
Electricity.
you need electric.
And
Right.
internet.
Well, internet is now now a utility, right? That's our basic thesis.
I need utilities, your gas and your heat and your electricity.
Right.
But I need fucking internet.
Gas, heat, water, trash, internet are now utilities, and you have to spend money on them, period. In order to exist on this planet, you now have those 5 things. So you transition from like to have to need to have, which means your pool of discretionary income shrinks. And You have less money to spend on what you want.
True.
Welcome to adulthood.
Hello, budget.
By the time you get to 40 or 45, you enter what Mr. Jones would call your high income
Earnings.
years.
Yeah.
And most likely, statistically speaking, you have children.
They're expensive.
You were looking for real estate.
Obviously, in sense of opportunities.
You're wanting appliances,
Well, you need to fill the need to simplify your life
cars,
because they are a status symbol or they are a means to get from A to B.
and if you were a little randy in your 20s, you now have children looking to further their education, which means now you have college tuition expenses.
Or savings to get there.
So as you enter your 40s, you're now in the third stage of economic impact, where you are spending the most you will ever spend.
This is the height of durable goods.
And you believe in this?
Yeah.
Okay.
It has to be because it's the only thing that makes sense. And it's been played out over and over and over again.
So let me throw this back at you. From 13 to 24, which was a period of 11 years, is what I would call consumption.
Mm-hmm.
From 24 to 40 is 16 years. And if I were to say 24 to 45, that's 21 years. Okay.
But there's a lot that happens in there. That's why it's 21. That's why it's a big one.
The next stage is 45 to 65, which is another 20.
62? I guess you extended it 3 more.
Well, this is why we should discuss. From 45 to 65 is the next phase.
I get that. That's fair.
And that phase is, now that you've got it, what do you do with it?
What do you do? It's an interesting phase to talk about. I actually really funny. I call that true adulting year.
Mass adulting.
It's the you have adulting and then you have adulting. And for the Bobs out there, what am I talking about?
Well, so pause for a second. When I first thought about the Bottle of Brown podcast over 5 years ago, Mr. Jones was on my kitchen cabinet, and I said, I want to do a podcast, and I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about this, and this is the cohort, this is the stuff I want to talk about. Mr. Jones went,
Jesus,
you're stupid. Nobody wants to talk about this. Who do you think cares? And I said, there's the millennial generation coming along that's going to be old enough to have these types of conversations. I think we have reached that critical mass of that generation of people that now have that conversation of, I have money, now what?
Oh, it's always the question. You've repeated that on many podcasts.
I think
now
we're in that 40 to 45 period of, fuck, now I have money.
Now
but
what?
I also have children.
Yeah.
Now what?
Yeah.
So my thesis is moving on to that third stage of 45 to 65. Now you have to figure out what to do with that money.
Well, what's the end? Or how do I this is the end game. It's not the end. It's how do I get to the end? Because this is the height of my earnings. My durable consumption is now super low, which is the biggest point here, is that you just purchased it all. Heaven forbid you're going to go keep the same spending habits in this period.
Nobody spends that much.
You don't. You fucking shouldn't be. If you are, get your shit in check. So you are not spending as much. But what you are doing is this is where I've invested in the past. So now I bought the home, and you hope that that home is sufficient to carry you to the end. Size, mortgage, whatever. Or foreclosure and new mortgage. You never know. It's a fucking crystal ball sometimes. So you hopefully make the right decisions. So now you're carrying yourself with, this is my nut. How do I grow my nut as much as I can and squirrel away enough that I then can finish the 65? Because we can't stay as sharp as we can in what we do. We cannot stay in the job at a certain point. No matter what time's going to go on, by the way, and the job's going to pass you, no matter how you get there. Programs are going to come out. You're not going to be sharp. So we're eventually going to have to figure out, how do we get to the end? And the end is really, how do we do it? And this is that period of time. So hopefully we make the investments, the economy cooperates, get to the finish line, so that when we are the 65, we can have the plan, whatever that plan is. How do we have the asset value enough to meet the finish? And that's kind of the plan and goal. You got to get to that 65, because hopefully the nut is big enough. We squirreled away enough we can basically make it to the end with Social Security, distributions from assets, and on top of a little bit of Medicare and Medicaid, hopefully.
So from 13 to 24, we want to spend and we have no income.
Which is really good. We have no income.
From 24 to 45, we have a large capacity to spend and we have more income. I would argue we are our spending needs vast outweigh our income. And then we hit 45. And from 45 to 65, we're in that third phase where we have way more income than we need to spend. And I'm talking aggregate. You can weigh all the variables, and certainly there are situations where this isn't true for everybody. But by and large, you make it to the third stage, you're going to save more or income more than you spend. And that's 45 to 65.
True.
So as demographics work, for those of you that have been waiting for the TLDR, from 13 to 24, you spend a lot because you're trying to figure out who you are, trying to find a mate, trying to have sex, you're trying to determine who you are and start a family. From 24 to 45, you're trying to spend money to accrue assets, trying to build a house, trying to build a life, trying to build an
not to mention
identity.
too, it's like you got a wedding ring to buy, you got a house to put down for a down payment, and those things are expensive.
Serious expenses of identity and status.
Just on those two.
Trajectory towards a life that you want. By the time you're 45, you have to assume that you have children, commitments, and an understanding of what is going to happen to you for the next 10 or 15 years. So at the age of 45, you now know, fuck, I can't go to Starbucks. I can't buy those shoes. I can't live that life because the choices that I have made have yielded, for example, 2 kids, real estate, cars, brokerage fees, bonds, stocks, Bitcoin, crypto, whatever. The point is, by the time you get to 45, you're done spending money.
Pretty much.
From 45 to 65, you now
Okay.
have to figure out what to do with that money because you're done spending. Would you agree?
Yes.
And we now have to start discussing
Yeah.
what do we do with the excess capital that we don't know how to spend?
We don't
that,
spend
to
it.
me, is a demographic question.
Yeah.
From 45 to 65, you stop spending and you start doing something with that money. Now, the easiest thing to say is invest it. Great. If you know how to invest, good for you. If you don't, here's the thing. If you have college bills for your kids, pay the college bills. If you don't have kids or you don't have college bills, you're going to keep making money. Is your mortgage paid off? No? Pay your mortgage off.
No, it's not. I
Ooh.
disagree.
Oh, I love it. Do it.
No. I think mortgages aren't the worst thing. I like to diversify the risk. Let the bank hold a little bit. Let yourself hold a little bit. No matter what your Social Security distribution should be is enough to cover whatever your mortgage or affordability should be. You should not necessarily pay off your mortgage because then you're giving away the overall tax reduction that you're looking at. Because remember, to a certain point, depending on the state you're in, depending on the government deductions, having the deduction and the interest expense that you're paying on that mortgage could be beneficial for the future. So it's not necessarily always the best, which I don't goddamn agree with a lot of people. But everybody's different. Your revenue stream is different. If you are self-employed, yes, you should pay off your mortgage. You have pensions if you have so forth. No, do not pay off your mortgage. Doesn't make any sense. You're pissing away money and returns you could get from another return somewhere else. So everybody is different.
I love the fiduciary statement.
So look at it however it fits you. You. It is nice to be mortgage free. You're going to pay more taxes. Fucking hate paying taxes. So think about it.
Demographically speaking, if you had children at 20, they are now adults when you're 38. If you had children at 30, they are now adults when you're 48.
Oh, this is the one that hurts.
Whether or not you fall into either of those scenarios, or whether or not you give a shit about children.
What happens when you have kids when you're 50 and all of a sudden you're going to then be, what?
Yeah, so you could have kids later. Perfectly normal. The general consensus is outliers in line is once you enter the third
Phase.
quadrant, is what I would say. once you enter the third quadrant of your time on this planet, and the third quadrant is 50 to 75, right? Your 0 to 25 is your first quadrant. Your second quadrant is 25 to 50. Your third quadrant is 50 to 75. Your fourth quadrant is 75 to 100. Your fourth quadrant is the end, last quarter, 75 to 100. The people that are interested in this podcast, the Bobs out there, smart ones, are thinking about what happens from 50 to 75. And I'm here to tell you, Mr. Jones is correct. 50 to 75 is now that you've spent, it's time for you to get yours. And for those of you that want a more altruistic answer, it's time for you to prepare for the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you do that? And the best way you do that is to take the assets that you have and prepare them for what's next. And that is a trust. Now, a trust is a legal vessel. You can go to a lawyer. You can probably go to LegalZoom.com for all I care.
No, go to a lawyer. Go to a lawyer.
Go
to a lawyer
to a attorney in your state,
that
in
does
your area,
probate and
that
overall
understands
trust
trusts,
laws.
and ask them, what do I do? Now, I have not done this, and I have received verbal beatings from Mr. Jones, from General Tezzo, all the characters that you know on the Bottle of Brown podcast universe, and they have all told me, you're stupid, and I have to tell you, I agree with them. I am stupid. However, the reason that we're having this discussion is because I want to know what Mr. Jones has done so that I can replicate his success. So, without further ado, your trust is, without divulging personal sensitive information, what did you do with your trust?
My trust encompasses, one, it encompasses my assets. So my home, my investments, my overall encompasses everything that I have inside the trust, which gives the directive inside this home or inside this document so that if I pass, I've now given directive about where it goes. And then the other side is the will, or however you want to say, this is what I want my end to be, where I want my body to end up, and my wife's, because it's our trust. It's our living trust. And so, anyways, the point is that at least gives the directive that I feel like, as well, I guess actually something too we haven't really got into is that if you pass, who takes care of your kids? So at least this is why when I say you have kids and this is why you set up a trust, is that it gives the directive on where these kids are going to be cared for. The trust is going to take care of them financially. Let's not worry about that. But who's going to take care of them? The state? Well, that's the worst decision. A parent, a friend, a sibling. Those are always what you want to basically convey inside there. If you don't do that, some judge somewhere in social security or social services is going to make that decision for you. Is that what you really wanted? For me, I'm going to give people my opinion. And this is why also then you have changes to things as like go along. You want your offspring somewhat fit your views or your upbringing. The last thing you want is something painful for them. So, if anything, for your children or whatever it is, you need to have it. What else does it provide? Well, not to mention the taxes, not to mention the shelter, not to mention just everything about them. But you need to do one, period. I don't really have more than that.
Well, let me give you a fun one. We talked to General Tezzo about it last night.
Mm-hmm.
He came up with some very interesting things that a trust covers. He's got one daughter. She may or may not have appeared in a previous episode. Not important for this discussion. He has said, if something happens to us, he's got like a flow chart.
Mm.
My daughter goes to this couple. If they can't handle it, it goes to this couple. If they can't handle it, it goes to this couple. And by the way, we're third in the list. And he said, I want our assets to go to her because it's his daughter. And I want our assets to go to her so much so that her husband can't touch it.
And that's the point, though.
I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, you can cut it up however you want.
We want our assets to go to our daughter, and our daughter cannot give them to her husband under the covenant of marriage, no matter what. And so if she meets a guy and she falls in love, that person can't touch her money.
Within respect, but I mean, at least it gives the sense of it's hers.
I love the specificity of it. She now has a collection of assets she's walking into a relationship with. And so she can now say to that person, I don't need you. I want you. And the reason I want you is because this is not about financial security, because I have my nest egg over here. My parents have solved the financial problem. You are a person I want to produce progeny with. I want to have kids with you. I want to produce humans that are half me and half you. And that to me has some weird level of purity to it. If you can say to a person, I no longer have any fear of finances. I am secure in my finances.
Freedom.
Money, it's freedom. It is plain and simple. It's freedom.
Nice to have it.
And you can say, I am now free of the bonds of material and financial needs. You, human over there, I really want to have children with you. You can now say in ways that we probably haven't had in over 1,000 years, maybe 3,000 years. Hey, you person, you and I should make tiny humans. And whether or not that's a good idea is no longer up to me because my finances are taken care of. To me, that's a beautiful fucking story.
Well, that's the point of a trust. Directive, decisions, rules, laws. Get on it. All you gotta do is make a phone call. There you go. There you go.
With that being said, that is our show. Give us a call at 984-BO-BROWN. Email us at bottleofbrown@gmail.com. Share a quiet drink with us next time. Same brown time. Same brown channel. bottleofbrown.com.
This place is dead anyway, man.